Standing before the beast they were tasked to destroy, a monstrous wild boar with an otherworldly shape, Licht was the sole survivor of the group. Perhaps the beast didn't want to kill a healer yet, or maybe it was simply hesitant. The strange wild boar snorted triumphantly, gazing at the warrior's blood pooling over the jagged stone floor of the cavern. Their bruised, broken bodies lay scattered. The beast had shown no mercy. Licht recognized the creature's overwhelming power, but knew peace would not come if he left things as they were. Determination burned in his eyes. He raised his hand. A tiny speck of light appeared in the air, rapidly expanding into a radiant stream of energy. The glowing tendrils curved, transforming into vibrant words. He shouted the command to revive, unleashing a counterattack. At first, nothing happened. The cave remained damp, reeking of death. Bodies lay motionless, weapons cold beside them. Then one hand twitched. From the brink of the underworld, the fallen began to return. A knight, once clad in shining armor, leapt to his feet, gripping a strangely crafted sword. "I am a living weapon. Don't judge," he declared. Without hesitation, he swung his blade, cleaving the monstrous boar in two. Even its tough spine couldn't withstand the strike. They returned to town, their mission complete. Relief washed over them as they stood under the open sky, free from the dungeon's cold grip. Their joy grew when they received a hefty bag of gold, as the creature had been on the wanted list. As always, they split the reward equally among the four. Licht claimed his share, though the team discussed how oddly easy the journey felt, with Licht repeatedly reviving them. "Did we miss something?" he joked. Though dying was unpleasant, staying dead was far worse. The team showered him with praise, grateful for his presence. Despite the accolades, Licht kept his powers a secret. He feared they might abuse them. A girl patted his back warmly, while a larger man gave him a hearty slap on the shoulder. The group leader, Alan, voiced his unwavering trust in Licht, urging him to maintain his form. With a serious expression, Alan confessed his high expectations for Licht. Thanks to Licht, they defeated countless monsters without needing resurrections, though they kept him around just in case. Their next major mission, after officially becoming Adventurer Esther, was to investigate a small temple, and here's where the true story begins. Slowly, they uncovered a truth. Licht had been betrayed by humanity. His power of resurrection was capable of reviving even demons. Branded as loyal and trustworthy, the team led Licht into a trap. A cold blade pierced his chest. They shoved him off a forest cliff, carrying out a brutal assassination. The guard captain dismissed the possibility of Licht's power triggering automatically. Everyone believed Licht was gone, dead after being disposed of over the cliff. In a dramatic Skyrim-like moment, he was left to fate. Planning revenge, Licht pondered who in the group had exposed his resurrection ability to the kingdom, but he resolved to leave before nightfall. Immortal he may be, but hunger and forest predators remained real threats. Betrayed by the kingdom he once served, Licht set out for the sea, far from those who had plotted his murder. Within days, or perhaps mere hours, he reached the coast. Time felt irrelevant. Only his goal mattered. What would they do if they discovered their intended victim had returned? What forces would they send to silence him for good? In this world, the ratio of humans to demons was a startling 1-7. Licht heard rumors of a suspicious dungeon nearby, rumored to offer the help he sought. Trusting little more than hearsay and instinct, he ventured forth, beginning a lonely journey. Without his team, survival was a fragile hope, but it was just a rumor. Exhausted and enraged, Licht collapsed, his knees sinking into the earth. The serene sea sparkled mockingly on the horizon. In anger, he hurled a rock at a nearby boulder jutting from the waves. He froze as the sound wasn't the impact of stone on stone. It was the clang of metal. Hidden beneath an illusion was a delicate metal door, its black and white beauty shimmering like a dream. Don't hesitate. Licht dove into the ocean, ready to cross the Atlantic on his own terms, hoping to avoid icebergs this time. He stood before the emergency exit door, feeling an irresistible pull beckoning him inside. It felt almost magical, that he could see without a lantern or any source of illumination. Deciding to attempt something bold, he cast a resurrection spell in the heart of the vast dungeon. The floor trembled, echoing deeply, as magic coursed beneath his feet like a raging current, awakening long-forgotten souls eager to return to life. Instantly, Licht felt his energy drain, his soul nearly ripped apart, his brain searing with pain. Regaining focus, he saw 5 figures materialize before him, 5 vivid and distinct forms. It was an intriguing team. 3 young girls, a matronly mother figure, and a Victorian Gothic lady, likely a vampire, who seemed to lead the group. The leader, a petite girl with long hair named Mao, commanded attention. Miss Goth pointed out that Licht was the only man present, and must have been responsible for reviving them. Licht, still dazed, looked at Mao with a shy, wary eyes, peeking through his hair. Mao promptly instructed the others to return to their guard posts, ordering them to keep everyone away while she had a private conversation with Licht. As the servants left, Licht became acutely aware of Mao's immense power, the overwhelming energy suffocating the room, warping the very air around her. She questioned how they were revived, given that they had been dead for a century, a feat impossible even for necromancers when bodies no longer existed. Noticing Licht's lack of hostility, Mao's demeanor softened. She offered Licht an invitation to join their cause, noting that he seemed troubled and could use their help. Mo officially welcomed Licht to the Demon King's army, revealing herself as the Demon King. Her true name, however, was Arya. Mao was merely her title, meaning Demon King. Licht introduced himself plainly and without flair, prompting Arya to thank him for reviving her group. Licht expressed curiosity about the others, and Arya, as their ruler, explained that they were her loyal retainers. Though grateful for their resurrection, the courtiers didn't shy away from complaining about their earthen beds. Each one of them, trusted by the Demon King, possessed incredible strength, enough to single-handedly annihilate armies if needed. Such was expected of her personal guard. Their first task was to restore Dystopia, the dusty dungeon they now stood in. Although the structure had aged, it retained its original grandeur and potential to become a suitable stronghold once more. Licht offered to help, but Arya laughed, playfully patting his back. "Why drag you to the battlefield?" she teased, recognizing his irreplaceable resurrection ability as the team's main character. She even hinted at finding the perfect ally for him. Still, Licht pointed out that the dungeon was far too vast for just 4 people to manage. Arya, unfazed, casually admitted they hadn't had much time to rest. She dismissed his concerns, leaving everything to him without hesitation. Licht sighed in frustration, but conceded this was better than being hunted by the kingdom. Exploring deeper, he reached the 2nd floor above Arya's quarters and found one of the girls diligently organizing books. Her name was Ferris, the guardian of the Corridor of Sorrows. Ferris was clearly not human, given her assignment deep within the dungeon. Licht, hoping to lighten her burden, explained that he had permission to assist. Suddenly, Ferris knelt before him, revealing that she was managing 5 areas of the dungeon simultaneously. Her task was made even harder by her need to defend the space closest to Arya, where the pressure from intruders was most intense. Licht realized helping her would not be easy, as the other guardians, Iris and Tice, worked in pairs. One of them seemed to act as the mother, while the younger one referred to her as Big Sister. The only practical solution for Ferris's floor was to install traps, easing her workload. Licht ventured to the primitive garden to meet the pair. Tisa, the elder sister, was calmly sipping tea, while Iris, the younger, cheerfully announced his arrival. Both already knew Licht's name, having overheard his earlier conversation with Arya. They assumed he was there to assess their situation. Licht continued observing their current challenges, offering suggestions to improve their operations. Tis and Iris exchanged concerned glances, their worry evident. After observing the situation for some time, Licht suggested a solution. They could divide responsibilities and control separate dungeon areas to improve efficiency. Tis immediately rejected the proposal. She explained with determination that she had always been Iris's big sister. Their strengths complemented each other best when they worked together, making separation impractical. Enter Rose, a Victorian goth vampire who ruled over the Batcave. Rose carried the heaviest burden, managing as many as 7 areas on her own. It hit Licht like a slap in the face. There was only one person who could turn their dire manpower situation into a joke. A name whispered among adventurers, the legendary Summoner. Determined, Licht decided to recruit Ferris for the mission. He set out in search of this elusive individual. However, the tomb guards were far from welcoming. They attacked without hesitation, targeting Ferris first. It was a grave mistake. In mere seconds after she was injured, the tomb guard collapsed, lifeless. The scene was nothing short of a massacre. When Ferris revived, she thanked Licht for his intervention, Then, without hesitation, she returned to the tomb guard, dagger in hand, and delivered the final blow. Together, they pressed on, their sights set on the stone tomb. Beneath a starlit sky, with the sound of crickets filling the night, their footsteps came to a halt before the long-sought tombstone. Licht performed the infamous resurrection spell. From within the coffin, several skeletal hands emerged, reaching out toward them. A soft sigh followed as the owner of those hands requested assistance in climbing out. Ferris and Licht wasted no time, pulling the girl free and clearing away the debris covering her. The revived summoner, young and pretty, gasped for air. "Dig me out first next time. Coffins aren't exactly breathable." Without delay, they got to the point. She was revived to join their team, her talents essential to their mission. The summoner immediately demonstrated her power, revealing that Ferris was not human with startling accuracy. She then inquired how they managed her resurrection without forming the typical magic bond. Licht explained his unique ability, including his extraordinary power to revive himself. With no time to lose, the group fled the cemetery before reinforcements could arrive. Back at Dystopia, the summoner, now called Necro, sprang into action. She summoned an army from the underworld to secure vulnerable areas. In just 3 minutes, her undead forces were fully deployed. Necro was also assigned her own area, earning the title of floor leader. With her reinforcements, the team could finally breathe easier, as spirits fortified weak zones and bolstered defenses. Necro, however, reflected on her unexpected situation. She had never imagined serving under the Demon King. She questioned Licht, a human clad in armor resembling a giant cross, about his alliance with demons. Licht's response was cryptic. Returning to the human world was no longer an option, for reasons better left unspoken. Meanwhile, in the capital, a curious girl inquired whether Licht's team had found a replacement for him. Normally, everyone had to fight on the front lines to protect the healer, but Licht had always been the exception. Healing mages are often frail, but Licht defies expectations, wielding the power to resurrect the dead. This ability not only made him formidable, but also ensured his survival in dangerous battles. The girl's true madness began to surface, as she boldly claimed they could always abandon the healer to die, just like before. Amid countless applications, Alan stumbled upon a personal letter, a dungeon investigation request. It detailed a site brimming with potent magical energy along a long-forgotten coastal area. The location wasn't far from their base, making travel relatively easy. But what truly caught their attention was the reward: 500,000 gold coins. Who could say no to that? A few days later, in Dystopia, Licht and Necro tidied up their room. Suddenly, Necro received a Discord warning from a spirit. Humans were closing in on the dungeon. They had explored the edges and found the newly opened entrance. However, they decided to hold off on acting, as an early attack might draw unwanted attention and escalate into war. Alan and his group entered the dungeon, triggering a plan already set in motion to destroy them. The first room greeted the adventurers with hundreds of wandering souls guarding Arya's sacred halls. Their naivete left them stunned by the overwhelming number of spirits, prompting Alan to question whether all of this was created by a single monster. 10 Lichts, Alan muttered in disbelief, but a voice from behind corrected him, or perhaps a vampire. Before Alan could react, he was teleported away, finding himself face to face with Rose. At first, he thought she was the dungeon master, but no, she was far worse. "It's time for you to die, weakling," Rose said coldly. Alan raised his sword, ready to strike, but it vanished mid-swing. Behind him, Rose nonchalantly held the blade, inspecting it. "Not bad quality," she mused. "What a waste on someone like you." She tossed the sword back to him with a bored expression. When Alan asked who controlled the souls, Licht's name emerged, leaving him frozen in shock. The boy he saw impaled, supposedly dead. Could Licht have resurrected himself? Rose scoffed, mocking Alan's ignorance, before dismissively saying she wasn't trying to scare him. "By the way," she added, "you've already lost." Bats swarmed Alan, biting and paralyzing him. Rose smirked, preparing to drain him dry. But then a thought struck her. If Licht kept reviving them, she'd have an endless blood supply. Hundreds of bats surrounded Alan, his screams of pain echoing through Dystopia. Meanwhile, in the forest, Shizuku wandered aimlessly, searching for her friends. She encountered Tess and Iris, both ready for battle. Pushed to her limits, Shizuku grew overconfident, only to be paralyzed when Iris's soul slipped into her body. The fight ended almost instantly, At the same time, Jose roamed through the dungeon's dark, maze-like depths. Lost, he stumbled upon Necro, who looked both adorable and ominous. Jose drew his sword, prepared for a fight. But Necro offered no revelations. The real shock came moments later, when Licht entered the room. Licht was searching for someone, Dorothy, a name that sounded strangely tender amidst the chaos. Jose felt the intensity of Licht's emotions saturating the dungeon. "How are you alive?" Jose demanded, recalling Licht's execution with his own eyes. If Licht had returned, perhaps Alan was here too. Licht seemed eager for a reunion with Alan, plotting to strengthen him through a few resurrective lessons. When Jose asked about the group's separation, Licht shrugged. "Teleportation traps," he said casually. Then Licht posed a chilling question. "Do you know about the kingdom's execution order on me?" After a brief silence, Jose admitted, "I know." Licht smirked. "And what's your reaction?" Jose hesitated before responding. "We'll never be as strong as before." True to character, Jose fixated on power and wealth. But when he pressed Licht for answers, Licht flipped him off and revealed his revival of the Demon King. Panicking, Jose threatened that the kingdom's army would destroy them. Licht merely welcomed the challenge. Deciding to flee, Jose activated a special item to escape. But spirits ambushed him, causing him to smash the teleportation gem onto the floor. Instead of reaching the surface, he was dragged into Ferris's room by a barrier. Drawing his weapon in desperation, Jose attacked Ferris, leaving her gravely injured. As she collapsed in a pool of blood, her mirror curse activated. Elsewhere, the king received news that all contact with the adventurers was lost. Fearing the worst, the council debated how long it would take before these monsters became a threat to humanity. The king's advisor devised a plan, calling for a diplomatic mission to warn neighboring nations. Preparations for the journey began urgently, aiming to unite against the looming threat. Back in Dystopia, Arya brooded over their worsening situation, calculating her next move in this deadly game. She was completely fed up with eating the same meals over and over again. The only thing that could salvage this dungeon's dreary menu was Tice's cooking skills. However, even Tice's abilities were limited by what Chinu could make with the scarce ingredients. Iris once tried cooking, and the emphasis here is on tried. Suddenly, Arya had a brilliant solution pop into her mind, neatly formed in her tiny head. Why not venture out and make friends with neighboring nations? This would not only guarantee a fresh supply of food, but it would also provide access to skilled human resources, especially if those nations were elves. Licht would naturally consider recruiting Tisa and Iris for this mission, since they were both part of the elf species. Moreover, Tisa and Iris weren't just any elves. They were high elves, a race regarded as superior to other elf breeds. Although they weren't particularly friendly, their respected status made their opinions valuable during negotiations. If successful, the mission would bring an abundance of fresh ingredients, meat, and talented chefs to their reserves. When Iris pouted, questioning why she wasn't allowed to cook, the others reassured her it was simply because Arya was a foodie. However, the truth was that Iris's food was unique, the kind of unique that bordered on poisonous. Their mission seemed simple: accompany Licht to the Elf Kingdom and protect him. Nothing too strenuous. Iris was visibly thrilled. But as they reached the surface, they were left speechless by the sight of Fenrir, the legendary giant beast casually kept as a pet. Licht assured everyone that Fenrir was well trained and could discern who was safe to be around. However, no one could guarantee it hadn't developed a taste for human flesh, which left everyone a little uneasy. Seated on Fenrir's massive back, Licht, the resurrected boy, admitted the scene was truly awe-inspiring. The three prepared for their first journey into Lance's wilderness, the lands of the elves. Iris felt a pang of sadness at having to leave Fenrir behind. Tisa was about to say something when a strange sound interrupted her, carried by the wind and weaving through the trees. It was a sound Licht couldn't hear, a distant cry for help. This time, the enemy appeared to be a giant spider, a creature known for its deadly hunts and near inescapable traps. Without hesitation, the two girls darted into the forest, with Licht following close behind. Unfortunately, they were slightly too late. A small girl lay motionless on the ground, seemingly moments away from becoming the spider's next meal. The High Elves, however, weren't about to waste time with this threat. They commanded small spirits that slipped into the spider's body, slicing through it effortlessly like a knife through butter. The massive spider was obliterated, as though struck by dozens of detonating bombs. The remaining spiders had no time to react. They were swiftly exterminated. While Licht focused on reviving the fallen girl, the girl's eyes fluttered open, and she gasped at the sight of a blackened monster lying lifeless nearby. Tisa demonstrated her gentle side, wrapping the little girl in a comforting hug, an act that would undoubtedly make Iris jealous. The girl bowed deeply, expressing her gratitude for her life being saved. She spoke words of sincere thanks. The group then asked the girl to guide them to the kingdom, and she eagerly agreed. The girl introduced herself as Lyrica, her sparkling eyes shining as brightly as the stars. Licht introduced himself and the two high elves accompanying him, and Lyrica couldn't help but marvel at their extraordinary beauty. The group traversed a verdant forest, guided straight to the kingdom they had sought for so long. Everything was just as they had imagined. The residents lived harmoniously among towering trees, blending into nature. The lively streets were filled with people and dappled with shadows. Yet, the three newcomers drew considerable attention, especially the two twin beauties, whose presence mesmerized the elves. High elves were rare, and two appearing together was extraordinary. Lyrica ran up, announcing the princess was ready to meet them. Even though the path was straightforward, Lyrica insisted on guiding them herself. As they admired the majestic trees of the elf kingdom, Iris felt a pang of envy, longing for such trees to grow in dystopia. Perhaps they could consult Rose to see if it was possible. Naturally, this idea might alarm her. Iris reminded herself to maintain decorum before the royal princess. Despite being a high elf, she was still just a young girl. Between Tis and the princess, who would display greater grace? Iris didn't seem to grasp this immediately. So they practiced outside, refining her words and actions until she was prepared for every scenario. When everything was finally in order, Lyrica opened the grand doors for the group. Now the only question was whether they could forge a positive relationship with the princess beyond those doors. If not, Arya might be left isolated, which would be disastrous given the risks they faced. Their mission required a successful outcome. Inside the spacious chamber, they were greeted by the princess, bowing humbly in welcome. Her demeanor exuded genuine warmth as she addressed the trio. She expressed regret for not showing gratitude sooner or preparing a way to repay their valor in vanquishing the terrifying giant spider. That creature had been a dire threat to the kingdom, one they were powerless against. Yet now hope seemed to shine brightly. The princess transitioned to negotiations, understanding they came with vital matters to discuss. Iris, recalling her training, presented their request to borrow the kingdom's most skilled individuals in exchange for dystopia's jewelry and weapons. The deal seemed fair, as many in the kingdom were curious about the outside world and eager for quests. In return, the elves sought only one thing: protection from monsters that plagued their forests. Like the giant spider, their people abhorred violence. A simple task for seasoned warriors like them. Once the agreement was made, the princess agreed to send their children to dystopia. Wait, children? That was surprising. Also, how did the princess know Arya's name when it hadn't been mentioned? The next mission involved allying with the Dragon King. Lich took Rose to the desert, a curious destination for a vampire. As they journeyed, Rose decided to accompany him, even though the original plan was for Lich to go alone. They soared through the sky, flanked by bats. Chatting along the way, Lich was astonished to learn that sunlight had no adverse effect on Rose, contrary to popular belief. Finally, they reached the Dragon King's settlement. By a distant river, a girl fishing felt a surge of malevolent energy. Her companion noticed her alarm, but the sensation quickly faded. For safety, the two considered ending their day by the river and returning home, especially since their mother was gravely ill. Recovery seemed impossible, but they couldn't show weakness. Their mother had barely eaten in days, and her condition showed no signs of improvement. Though healers existed, none had the ability to cure diseases. Meanwhile, Rose and Leech strolled through the village, searching for someone approachable to establish a rapport with. The settlement felt more like a scattered village than a unified kingdom. Rose asked if infiltration was part of the plan, but Lish dismissed the idea. Their best bet was to engage a lone dragonkin in conversation. Approaching a group could provoke hostility and ruin their chances of alliance. Soon, Rose spotted two dragonkin returning from a fishing trip. Lish decided they should approach under the searing desert sun. Neither dragon appeared armed, nor was anyone nearby to intervene. Lisht seized the opportunity. "Good evening," he greeted, prompting Kane, the elder of the two, to be wary. Kane immediately recognized Licht as human, but Rose emanated a dark, fiery aura that unnerved him. He bluntly told them they were unwelcome. Before they could be turned away, Licht revealed Arya's prized sword, stunning the dragon twins with its exquisite craftsmanship. They wondered if Licht might carry a cure for their ailing mother. Rose, holding a clove of garlic, watched as Licht asked what remedy might ease their mother's pain. Kane described her deteriorating condition. Licht, brimming with ideas, saw an opportunity to prove their worth. If they could cure her, trust would follow. He swiftly drew a magic circle, casting a resurrection spell on a dead fish in the basket. Witnessing this, Lalka, Kane's sister, was overwhelmed and called Licht their savior. She led them to her family's humble home. Inside, 3 other dragonkin awaited, including their frail mother, 2 younger men, and an elder with grief etched into his features. When the siblings returned with strangers, suspicion lingered, but Licht's claim of being able to heal softened their wariness. Yet doubts persisted. How could he do it? Resurrection spells only worked on the deceased. As fate would have it, the mother's condition worsened. Her final breath escaped. Licht immediately cast his spell, reviving her with a vitality that left everyone in awe. The family erupted in joyous disbelief, overwhelmed by the miracle before them. With trust secured, Licht showcased the weapon design he wanted them to replicate. The dragonkin agreed to provide materials, leaving the crafting to their most skilled artisans. Far away in dystopia, a massive shadow surged toward the gates, spraying seawater in its wake. The ensuing explosion rocked the city's foundation, waking all who weren't already on high alert. Down below, Dorothy and Licht were inspecting the area, discussing the dual alliances Licht had just forged. Licht admitted that allying with the Dragon King had been partly luck, while Arya seemed increasingly preoccupied with external affairs. Was she planning to conquer the world? Likely not, but her interest in global matters stemmed from a disaster 100 years ago. Asking her about it, however, was forbidden. When Dorothy once tried, Arya grew furious and locked herself away in her room. Perhaps that enigma is the very reason she seeks to bolster her military power, determined never to repeat her past mistakes. Speaking of military matters, it appears the human king is concealing a hidden weapon, a trump card no one is aware of. As Licht and Dorothy moved down the hallway, they were greeted by Rose. She announces that Arya has called the group to the throne room for a meeting about the East. The Demon King has begun his rampage, and things could get even worse. Downstairs, the group finds Arya seated on her throne, visibly distressed. The room fell into silence, each person exchanging wary glances, uncertain of what to do next. Breaking the silence, fairies spoke, expressing their concern for her. Finally, Queen Arya spoke. She once believed their demon race should unite to fight against the evil humanity has wrought on the world. A common enemy, even some demons despise it deeply. But what did the Demon King do? He responded by casting a spell from his castle, striking the gates of dystopia at midnight. "If you want to fight, come here," Licht retorted. After a brief exchange, the group understood that Demon King Garga was furious over the return of his predecessor and was set on finding a way to destroy her. In preparation for battle, Arya teams up with Licht and devises a plan, while the others are assigned various tasks. Rose was eager to charge in head first, but the more cautious approach was to avoid direct confrontation with Garga's overwhelming forces. Instead, they would take risks, using Dorothy's soul power and the elf girl's spirit beasts as their vanguard. Rose would transform into a bat, slip past their defenses, and gather information from within. Soon after, Licht and fairies left the Demon King's castle, with numerous small spikes trailing behind them, likely for surveillance. A giant creature with long horns and jagged jaws swiped at them with its claws, felling an ancient tree. One of Iris's summoned beasts took control of the monstrous creature, resembling a demo character from TF2, and in moments, the creature let out a deathly roar. The demon army is a force like no other, stronger than anything humanity has faced. Without the guardian beasts, they would be in grave danger. The demon army now controls 70% of the world's land, including the eastern region where they stand. The Demon King's castle looms ominously on the horizon, a dark silhouette against the sparse forest, carved into the mountain, both majestic and terrifying. Many adventurers have attempted to explore the area, but none have returned. Thanks to Dorothy's ability to control souls, the group has managed to infiltrate the demon castle and gather valuable information to report back to Arya. Lady Karma then decided to strike a dangerous blow. Fairies was pierced through the chest by an attack from the distant castle, the blow striking both her heart and throat. Believing the attacker to have been neutralized in the process, Lick searched for other signs of danger, and when nothing appeared, he revived Fairies. As she regained consciousness, Fairies began to add nano to her sentences, forgetting the usual desu at the end. The two ventured into the open, and though the attacks had stopped, the enemy seemed confused, unsure of what had just transpired, especially after losing one of their own. From a distance, Licht wondered if the enemy had used their trump card too early, revealing their power by accident. If they realized Ferris's hatred ability, it could become a liability, but as long as they didn't kill her, they would be safe. Ferris was told to stay close to Licht as much as possible. If he could protect her, the chance to deceive the enemy still remained. Of course, Licht didn't realize how intimate his words sounded, but he was completely oblivious to the situation. Meanwhile, Licht's suspicions turned out to be correct. The sniper who had killed Ferris died in the same manner, destabilizing their leaders even more. They began to suspect that the enemy had infiltrated their ranks, as the way the girl died seemed too strange. The room showed no signs of a struggle or forced entry. This girl was high-ranking in the military, and it was not easy to take her down without a fight. They quickly realized that the female sniper's death mirrored her targets. Something was amiss. The girl who discovered the sniper girl immediately reported the situation to the Demon King. Meanwhile, Lion Commander Dover prepared to educate the intruders. Once finished, he planned a meeting to discuss their next steps and brought out the Sword of Wrath to deal with the group. Meanwhile, Lish thought they had successfully infiltrated the enemy's defenses. But just as he thought that, Commander Dover appeared, flanked by two elf children, one with a bow, the other with a sword. The two elves did not appear to be slaves, but Dover immediately swung the Sword of Wrath, striking at Licht, while the children moved toward Fairies. An arrow pierced her chest, and the other boy struck, cutting her, intending to kill her instantly, to demonstrate Ferris's resurrection abilities. Though Dover had witnessed her powers, he knew he couldn't last much longer, as blood began to pour from his eyes. This was because Iris's summoned beasts were carrying out their duty. Finally, the Demon King became aware of the intruders. The Demon King of the East, Garga, was utterly bored. He had no desire to rule the entire world. Maintaining such power was exhausting and brought no joy. Tormenting the weak no longer entertained him, and the occasional adventurer seeking challenge only added to his ennui. But then, a letter from Arya changed everything. She proposed a large-scale cooperation against humanity, their common enemy. Rather than responding formally, Garga unleashed a magical attack across the country, aiming it directly at dystopia's gates to see how things would unfold. If she truly had the potential to be an interesting playmate, Garga was willing to give it a try. In response, Arya launched an equally powerful counterattack, declaring him an immediate enemy. Someone like Arya, a worthy opponent, appears only once in a century, and she knew exactly where he resided. But when the girl reporting to him asked what would happen if the Demon King he'd angered turned out to be the one sealed a century ago, and if there was any chance of victory, Garga dismissed it, calling it unreasonable. The entity was banished deep underground. Garga then advised the girl to hide if she didn't want to die. She refused, choosing to stay and fight by his side. But the real question lingered. What could she actually do? The girl remained frozen, lost in silence and confusion, torn between obeying him and fleeing, or defying his commands and staying to fight. Her decision to remain would cost her when Rose's bats came crashing down, attacking so swiftly that the Demon King didn't even have time to blink. The girl approached Garga, her expression dull and sorrowful, and he suddenly realized she was the servant from before. To end her suffering, he granted her a merciful death. Rose immediately spoke, accusing him of cruelty, but it was hard for her to cast judgment, given that she had caused the initial chaos. Garga was ready to ignore Rose to focus on fighting Arya, but paused to deal with the opponent in front of him. He smirked, knowing Rose had no idea of her master's true nature. "How dare you?" she shouted. But her words only clarified things for him. He read her like an open book, forcing Rose to retreat and strike again, yet every attack missed. When he was close enough, Garga lightly slid his foot over Rose's heel, causing her to stumble and fall onto the cold floor. He calmly told her to give it her all, as he needed a worthy opponent. He didn't enjoy torturing the weak, and her frail human form showed little strength. If she didn't give her all, she would die a useless death, disappointing him for such a small and pitiful reason. Upon hearing that, Rose stood, her voice icy. Okay, you win. And then she transformed into a giant, half-wolf, half-bat creature. Garga could no longer decipher her thoughts. She acted purely on instinct. Yet his overwhelming strength was sufficient to force Rose into a corner. He severed one of her arms, but she responded in time, cutting off one of his arms in return. Just before her teeth were shattered, a hole formed in her chest, sealing her fate and ending the fight. Garga admitted, despite her brief appearance, she was a formidable adversary. On the cold stone floor, Rose's corpse lay lifeless, surrounded by bloodstains, marking the brutal ordeal she had endured. Then, a familiar voice echoed from behind him. Enjoying yourself, are you? Garga turned, and there stood Arya, cute yet deadly, prepared to tear him apart. She seemed to have materialized out of thin air, though she had been watching the battle since he first flirted with Rose. Even the mighty Demon King of old couldn't resist the tension between them. So Arya remained silent, observing from the shadows. Now Garga was left with only one arm to fight with. Despite being intrigued by Arya's power, he had the ability to read her name and sense her thoughts through telepathy. Noting her deep-seated hatred for the attack on Dystopia, he mused, "You should relax a bit." The suggestion both surprised and irked Arya. Garga was lost in unpredictable thoughts, but Arya coldly told him to heal his arm with magic before attempting another attack. Arya knew full well Garga possessed healing magic, and she was not surprised. Someone like you surely has it, she thought. Though filled with murderous intent, she wasn't cruel enough to strike a recovering foe. As soon as Garga regained his strength, he raised his blade, bringing it down with all his might to cleave Arya in two, but with an unsettling calmness in her eyes. Arya used her space manipulation abilities, slowing everything to a crawl. With a simple step aside, she avoided the attack effortlessly. Garga's shock was akin to the disbelief of hearing about Raid, Shadow Legends for the first time. He quickly realized something was wrong. A thick, honey-like substance clung to his limbs, weighing him down and slowing his movements. Arya ruled this space, her manipulation of it absolute. To demonstrate her power, she casually broke his fingers, showing no hesitation. The attack had been swift, though its purpose remained unclear. Garga had no time for retaliation, nor could he avoid the strike. Arya's moves were too unpredictable. Desperately, he hurled darts at her eyes, but Arya simply tilted her head, letting them sail past her harmlessly. With the reflexes sharper than a blade, Arya proved she controlled space, while everything else around them moved in slow motion, except for her, who maintained her natural speed. For a fair fight, Garga needed to escape this dimension and take the battle outside, where Arya would be forced into a direct confrontation. But doing so was nearly impossible. Turn his back, and she would strike. His only hope was to kill her here, but in his weakened state, that was an unattainable feat. Knowing Lich and fairies were on their way, Arya decided to finish this before they arrived. She didn't want Garga reading their thoughts. When Lich and fairies arrived, they found Arya beside Rose's fallen body. With a simple nod from Arya, Licht began reviving Rose. Once she regained consciousness, Rose asked in confusion, "Where's the Demon King of the East?" Arya, with a motherly smile, warmly embraced Rose, glad to see her old friend alive after the fierce battle. After her first victory over a true adversary, Arya declared a celebration that night to commemorate the victory in this brief war. Meanwhile, in the human kingdom, tensions escalated as pleas for aid from the elves and Dragon King went unanswered. The only solution seemed to be reaching out to the Ratha kingdom for reinforcements, the last remaining human kingdom. Shortly after, Arya asked Licht if he wanted to visit the human world with her. "Sorry, what did you just say?" Arya smiled and explained that she knew of an intriguing place in the human world and wanted to see if he would join her in exploring it. Licht would have agreed right away, if not for the fact that it was a place he had once fled from. But Arya reassured him that she wasn't planning on going there. Her true destination was the kingdom of Ratha. Licht suddenly recalled that name. He had tried many times to approach adventurers from there, but all attempts failed. Rumors spoke of the kingdom's elite warriors, but solid information was scarce. So what drew Arya's attention to this place? It was undeniably a human nation, but Arya's tone suggested uncertainty. Licht sensed she was hinting at something unusual about this kingdom. Was it filled with monsters? Almost, Arya replied, speaking in an unexpectedly classical manner that caught Licht off guard. The people were human, but their queen was a demoness. What stood out was that the queen didn't rule with ruthless power. She lived like a normal person, enjoying the simplicity of life, a female demon blending seamlessly into human society. And that intrigued Arya. Moreover, this queen wasn't just any demoness. As Licht began to grasp the situation, Arya grabbed his arm, and they both rushed off. Arya soared into the sky with ease, as if gravity posed no challenge. Meanwhile, in the kingdom of Rathta, Queen Byrne was managing her court. Her maid, Anna, marveled at the queen's beauty and natural grace. Later, Byrne retired to her private quarters to rest, alone. She collapsed onto the bed, releasing the pent-up tension of the day. Her limbs stretched out, as if freed from a heavy burden. Byrne only desired peace among humans, not the responsibilities of ruling them. But everything changed in an instant when Arya and Licht appeared behind her, as though from thin air. She immediately threatened to summon the guards, but Arya revealed her true nature as a demon. How do you know? Arya's glowing eyes and the overwhelming aura surrounding her made it clear, forcing Byrne to transform into a kitsune. Yet, Byrne still refused to believe Arya's claim of being the Demon King. Do you expect me to believe such a blatant lie? Byrne questioned. Without warning, Arya snapped her fingers, and Licht exploded beside Byrne. Byrne was paralyzed with shock, watching Licht collapse lifelessly to the ground. But moments later, Licht's resurrection magic took effect, and he rose from death, sitting up in full health. That was enough to convince the cute kitsune. Arya's cold-killing intent and immense magical pressure showed that ending a human's life was as easy as a snap. She was on an entirely different level, far beyond anyone still alive. Anna knocked on the door, curious about the noise, but Byrne gently reassured her that there was nothing to worry about. Byrne then explained that all she wanted was a peaceful life among humans, though she had somehow ended up as their queen. Arya was torn between thinking Byrne was either incredibly smart or incredibly naive. Quite a remark coming from someone so diminutive. In the end, Byrne was promised eternal beauty and the ability to revive, immortality in all its forms, in return for her unwavering loyalty. After sharing some tender moments with Anna, which included brushing her hair, accompanied by some endearing sounds from monsters, a few days later, a bond of friendship was formed. During this time, a messenger from another human nation arrived, requesting an audience with the Queen of Byrne. In the past, she had refused such invitations to avoid revealing her true nature as a demon and risking exploitation, but now, the time had come for action. The messenger's arrival was prompted by news of dystopia and a desire to secure support from the high-ranking adventurers there. However, since Byrne had aligned herself with Arya, the human nation had become a rival she could not ignore. When Byrne consulted her advisors, they suggested that, rather than turning them away, they should hear the messenger out. Cooperating to conquer a dungeon could be a wise strategy, as it might become a threat if neglected. Furthermore, gathering the opposing country's adventurers to meet Arya could prove advantageous, and might even impress the great Demon King. Therefore, Byrne decided to meet the messenger and assess the situation further. Anna, concerned for her mistress's safety in meeting a high-ranking adventurer on mere invitation, voiced her worries. "Don't worry, my dear," Byrne reassured her. "Just because I'm a woman doesn't mean I'm weak." Byrne's plan was to turn this opportunity into a trap, leading the enemy directly into destruction and handling them all at once. When she met the messenger, she saw a man with a deep scar running across his face, an S-rank adventurer. He expressed his honor in meeting the rare queen of the kingdom, though it was a kingdom of queens. The man openly shared that they had previously tried to scout the target dungeon to assess its danger, but the expedition they sent had not returned. If she understood correctly, he had a hunch that, if left unchecked, the dungeon could eventually become a global threat. The dungeon was infamous in the adventurer community as a hazard too dangerous to approach, even with long stakes. What troubled him the most was the number of powerful individuals they had sent, including 3 S-rank adventurers, but none had returned. This suggested that the place might be the domain of a demon king, should someone have the sharp eyes to recognize the signs. To make matters worse, there had been a recent disturbance at the Demon King of the East Castle. It was impressive how quickly he had pieced together this situation. A bit of information about Rasaga Kingdom's hidden treasure was revealed. A sword that grows sharper the more damage its wielder takes. Could that be their trump card? Using it as the ultimate weapon could lead to a miserable death. The depressed man banged his head on the table. Queen Byrne, maintaining her politeness, ignored his odd behavior for the moment. So, when do we enter this mysterious dungeon? She asked. According to him, everything had been prepared on Rasaga's side, and he was merely waiting for her decision. How convenient. Byrne lied that she needed more time to notify the Adventurers Guild before acting. In truth, she planned to use that time to report to Arya-sama. He cheerfully promised to bring good news from this mission, blissfully unaware of the dangers awaiting him. Deep within Dystopia, Licht stopped by to visit Dorothy and share some fruit Iris and Tissa had gifted her. Dorothy happily joined him, as neither of them could finish the entire bowl. They sat back, enjoying the fruit and chatting. Luke and Dorothy chatted about how quiet things had become, and how there wasn't much left to do. They could finally relax now that everything was running smoothly. Honestly, a bit of peace was a welcome change. Constant fighting could exhaust anyone. However, if they rested too long, the burden would fall on Rose again, making it harder for her to manage everything. Though Rose's endurance exceeded that of humans, she still had limits. Dorothy once offered to help ease Rose's load, but Rose had firmly refused, insisting she was a big girl and could handle things on her own. After a warm chat between Dorothy and Licht, which could easily lull someone to sleep if they listened too long, the door suddenly opened and Arya entered, her face filled with excitement. She declared that the moment had come. Humanity was about to launch an attack on Dystopia, and things would soon become extremely heated. Licht could only think of one plausible reason for the Rasaga Kingdom's current actions, and that reason was nothing short of suicide. Arya confirmed that this was a full-scale attack, gathering humanity's elite forces with the goal of annihilating everything and sending the survivors to the underworld. If they were truly this determined, Dystopia must be an even greater threat than it appeared. It wouldn't be surprising if they had uncovered the identity of whoever was buried here by their legendary hero. Byrne announced the impending attack and explained that Rasaga was attempting to build alliances to gain crucial support for their campaign. Despite his efforts, Licht couldn't shake the dark memories of his old country, which he no longer even considered human after what they had done. However, Byrne couldn't gather any more useful information other than confirming their movements, without specifics on their strength or numbers. After pondering, Arya turned to Licht, hoping he might have something to use against his former kingdom. When he shook his head, Arya immediately turned to Dorothy, seemingly forgetting that Dystopia had been out of contact with the human world for over a century. Now, with this tense situation, if there were any tactics to test, this was the perfect time to implement them. Arya left the preparations in their hands and decided to rest, readying herself for the upcoming battle with a clear mind. They assembled their forces. The meeting began at Batcave. There, Rose awaited their arrival. After exchanging a few formalities and sharing coffee, they wasted no time. The plan was simple. Tease and Iris would continue handling the enemy crowds as usual. Meanwhile, Rose would follow Arya's direct orders. She would charge through the battlefield, focused on eliminating all but their allies. Fairies would collaborate with Licht, making Dorothy feel a twinge of jealousy. The flowers of love began to bloom among the group. With the strategy set, Iris rested to regain her energy. She was soon awakened by her big sister, Elf. The team was preparing to enter the fray. The battle, it seemed, had begun. Rose held the entrance to Dystopia alone, a feat that stunned everyone, as the human forces surged like a flood onto the battlefield. This meant their best option was to flank and clear out the strays. Meanwhile, Iris secretly imbued her summoned beasts with the insanity effect. Anyone near the entrance became mad, wild as beasts. A bloody whirlwind formed at the gates. One of her beasts fell, a sign that a skilled warrior had joined the front lines. The air was thick with murder, destruction closing in. People turned on each other, cutting down anyone in their way. While Rose crushed all resistance, humans began calling her a monster. A berserker, staggering, approached his closest comrade. His sword raised high, he screamed, aiming to pierce his friend's shield. But instead of striking, he received a crushing kick to the stomach. The man must have been infected by a vampire. Yet his transformation seemed unusual, more violent than any other monsterized human. But it was clear, he was ready to bite. He drove his sword into his former friend's chest, and then beheaded him, a faint glow emanating from the corpse. In that instant, Rose appeared behind the killer. He attacked her without hesitation, hoping to hold her off until reinforcements came, or so Rose thought at first. But no help arrived. His reaction told her everything. He tried to play the hero, to keep her in the fight. But that didn't last long, as Rose easily pierced his armor. His eyes, wide in terror, locked on Rose as life slowly drained from him. He knelt, his face draining of color. Not that he had much to begin with. The last thing he saw was the sharp-eyed vampire, looking down at him with a touch of pity. As Licht had foreseen, several enemies had breached his corridor, charging without hesitation in the dim light, tasting the darkness. Now they would clash face to face for victory. Could Licht hold his own in this battle? Licht, a former S-rank adventurer, could have won easily if his opponents were only ordinary humans. But today, his foe was no ordinary man. It was Guy, another S-rank adventurer. In close combat, Guy was a true challenge, far more formidable than anyone else. Strangely, Licht almost expected Guy to target fairies first. Guy had earned his legendary status not only by ranking among the current top S ranks, but also by serving as the right-hand man of King Rasaga, an honorary title only given to 3 individuals in the history of the nation. Compared to him, all other enemies were like tiny fish next to a shark, like a villain in a manhwa. Fairies was given her orders, and she nodded in acknowledgement. She began walking toward Guy, unarmed and showing no hostility. Was he bound by the old code of chivalry and wouldn't attack a girl, but with no hesitation? Ferris drew a small knife from her leg strap and lunged, pretending to stab Guy in the heart, hoping to distract him and seize his weapons. Yet Guy was no fool. Such a simple trick could not deceive him. In the blink of an eye, he pinned her to the floor, sword drawn and ready. He looked disappointed, thinking she was far weaker than he had anticipated. After handling fairies, he turned to his next target, Licht. Guy tried to remain civil, asking about their plan of action, but only received a cold, distant stare from Licht, someone Guy recognized from his past. Licht attempted an old escape trick, but Guy quickly saw through it and tied him up next to fairies. Guy stabbed Licht in the shoulder, demanding to know why he seemed so familiar, but Licht pretended to be unconscious from the pain. When Guy realized Licht's ruse, he swiftly turned back to Ferris. The girl had not uttered a single word since being captured. Guy assumed she would speak up to avoid further pain, but she remained silent. That's when something chilling happened. He realized she might have completely lost her sanity from the stress. Guy grabbed her bangs and lifted her head, looking straight into Ferris's eyes, but the sight sent a wave of terror through him. Her eyes were filled with hatred, as though cursed souls were glaring back, making him feel a desperate urge to scream, warning him to release her if he valued his life. A shiver ran down his spine, compelling Guy to release his grip on her before doing anything else to this terrifying little girl. The door swung open and Rose stormed in, assessing the situation with her friends. Without hesitation, the vampire knocked the S-rank adventurer unconscious with a single kick, the impact causing him to lose consciousness instantly. Rose then untied Licht and fairies, tears streaming down her face as she apologized like a child for being late and for Licht's injury. Once freed, Ferris admitted she couldn't be of much help, and it seemed Licht wasn't in much better shape either. The 2 girls carefully examined Licht's shoulder wound, fearing it might become infected. Rose decided to carry him on her back, and the group headed to Ferris's room to tend to his injuries. Meanwhile, Rose's bats reported that all traces of human invaders had vanished. The reason was simple. They had awakened Arya. Arya was now wandering the hallways, stepping over the corpses of those who had paid the price for her recklessness. After returning to her room without issue, Arya received a victory report from Iris and Taise. She decided to reward everyone with a few days of rest after the battle with humanity. Finally, they could all relax and recover from the pressure of the recent fight. Rose suddenly confided in Licht that she planned to use the days off to visit Mom and Dad, a statement that surprised everyone. But were they still alive after a century? Rose explained that for a vampire, 100 years is but a fleeting moment. So unless something catastrophic happened, they would still be around. What shocked everyone more was that Rose asked Licht to accompany her. She wanted him there not just for protection, with his ability to revive if things went wrong, but also to introduce him to her parents as a lifesaver, a tradition perhaps in Japan. Licht agreed, though he was a bit nervous about whether her parents would be intimidating or peculiar. But Rose reassured him. No, they are kind and always warm to those who help their family. Anyone who's a friend to their daughter is like family. And one more thing. Dorothy, the female necromancer, would also be joining them. They were set to leave the next morning, so the time had come to rest for the long journey ahead. As they soared through the sky, the group began to chat casually. Dorothy was the first to speak, sharing the story of Rose's past. It turned out that Rose had once been a weepy child, easily moved to tears. In contrast, Dorothy was her polar opposite. Her teacher made her cry every day. But from that, Dorothy found strength and resilience. Dorothy jokingly claimed she must have a stomach of steel to handle the hordes of zombies that came with the title of legendary necromancer. However, the story about her death was a lie. She hadn't been killed by a single creature, but rather assassinated by 5 people while she slept. Rose quickly shifted the conversation to her beloved animals. To her, birds and dogs were the best children of the animal kingdom. In many ways, Rose was like a dog, loyal, affectionate, and always craving praise from her owner, Arya. Dorothy, on the other hand, was more like a cat, which made perfect sense. When they arrived at Rose's family estate, the group was taken aback by the wealth her family possessed. Rose, it seemed, was not just a lady, but a respected one. Lady Connor, visibly surprised, wondered aloud who could be strutting around in such fine clothes. Rose pushed open the door with an air of authority, as if she truly belonged there, because she did. The servants greeted her with joy, announcing her return. Rose requested to be taken to her parents, and her wish was promptly fulfilled. Dorothy and Licht stood out in this formal setting, and were escorted into the room. Rose's father immediately revealed his eccentric side, while her mother, the source of Rose's beauty, embraced their daughter with warmth and affection. Rose's father wasted no time, instructing the chef to prepare her favorite dishes for a grand welcome home feast. Rose introduced Licht and Dorothy as her companions, but her parents completely misunderstood the nature of their relationship. As everyone gathered around a table laden with food, Licht and Dorothy exchanged uncertain glances, wondering if they should help. That was when Rose's father, Arius, asked Licht to introduce himself. Mr. Arius and his wife, Camilla, inquired about Rose's personality at work, hoping she wasn't causing trouble. Licht, choosing his words carefully, painted a far more flattering picture of Rose, which eased the atmosphere. Then came the million-dollar question. Why had Rose been absent from home for the past century? The truth was, it was difficult to visit home after being killed. However, they didn't dwell on that, as it was clear she was right there, alive and well. After a brief pause for thought, Rose's father concluded that anyone who had killed her would suffer a painful fate. As for Licht, who had brought their daughter back, he would be handsomely rewarded. But first, he needed more time to think it over. For now, the family enjoyed a hearty meal, prepared with great care. Later, Arius led Licht into his private office and revealed how utterly stunned he had been when he first heard about his daughter's ordeal, including how Licht had revived the great demon king Arya. Licht, curious, asked how Rose had first met Arya. After all, vampires and demons usually didn't mix. Arius nodded and began to explain that when Rose was young, a group of vampire hunters had surrounded their entire family, intent on exterminating these so-called bloodsuckers. In that moment, both parents fought desperately to protect their daughter, but the hunters had a specific target, Rose. Their plan was simple. If they killed her, it would provoke a much more predictable reaction from her parents. That was when Arya appeared. She targeted only the hunters, swiftly eliminating all except for Rose's family. In an instant, it was all over. Though demons and vampires are sworn enemies, Rose didn't care about that. The reason for her loyalty to Arya became clear, especially after experiencing the warmth and affection from the great demon king following the battle with Garga. Yet, Arya had another burning question. Why would a human like Licht revive the mortal enemy of his own kind? Licht hesitated for a moment, before answering plainly, I want revenge on humanity. He hadn't revealed this to Arya yet, but that was his ultimate goal, and nothing would stand in his way. The older man felt grateful that Licht was honest with him, and was about to speak. Suddenly, a voice called from behind, asking what their father was doing. It was Rose, appearing in a simple nightgown, making her look unexpectedly sweet. Dorothy soon caught up with Licht, as he walked briskly through the vampire castle, forcing her to quicken her pace. They debated whether it was alright to tread on such luxurious carpets and risk getting them dirty, but Licht pointed out that if they kept worrying about minor details, It would soon become bothersome. The two were searching for the library Rose had mentioned, located within the family castle. Suddenly, a maid's sweet voice rang out from behind, offering service to Licht. The maid led Licht and Dorothy through the corridors, guiding them to the library they were seeking, not far from where they were. As expected, the room was lined with shelves of classic books. One book in particular caught Licht's eye, adorned with a dragon skin cover and a large jewel in its center. While Dorothy flipped through the pages, Licht opened a photo album of Rose's childhood. She had been an adorable baby, and even now she was still as cute. They spent some time reminiscing about Rose's childhood cuteness, recalling how, when everyone gathered, all she had to do was touch the floor. The maid, lost in nostalgia, admitted how much she missed that little girl. Then the maid made a somewhat selfish request. She wanted to capture the moments when Rose worked in dystopia. Meanwhile, Dorothy flipped through the book at lightning speed, and without asking for permission, tried a spell on Licht, summoning long, noodle-like arms from the floor, which tightly bound his feet, rather rude. There were many more spells in the book, but the one that intrigued Dorothy the most required a corpse, something they had no shortage of, not with resurrection still an option. The next morning, Rose tried to wake Licht since it was already past noon, and it seemed if she didn't get him up, he would sleep the day away. With no other option, she bent down and gently bit his hand. When a servant brought the news at breakfast, the whole mansion was thrown into chaos. There was an intruder. Upon hearing the news, the three rushed to action, all dressed in their usual attire except for Rose. The servants reported that they were searching for 3 intruders, believed to be vampire hunters. It seemed this would become a one-on-one battle between them and their pursuers. Licht paused to think for a moment before telling Dorothy and Rose that they should join the fight as well. Both nodded, and the trio, a vampire, a necromancer, and a magical immortal, rushed out the door. In a corner of the villa, 2 men stood, one keeping watch for danger, while Eyelf, one of the intruders, was asked by a masked man if this was truly a good idea. But with a huge reward, if they could wipe out the place, no one wanted to back down. A girl in the group sarcastically asked Mr. Mask if he was going to give up, calling it embarrassing. But in truth, the only shameful thing here was her lack of self-preservation. The real situation was far from what they had been told, as they examined the research papers on their target. The plan was to surround and eliminate the 2 vampires living there. In a true divide-and-conquer fashion, the group spread out to gain tactical advantage. However, Alf was caught by one of the servants while sneaking around a corner. He swiftly placed a knife at her back, warning that any further noise would cost her life. But that warning didn't stop her. She immediately shouted Dorothy's name and stabbed under his armpit. A serious wound, but not necessarily fatal. Instead of screaming in pain, she collapsed right away. Dorothy appeared, using her noodle hand magic to grab Alf. He broke free, mocking her. Finally, the vampire shows up, but upon seeing Dorothy's face, he was momentarily shocked. She was clearly human. He ordered her to kneel, promising to spare her life if she obeyed. Dorothy, unfazed, summoned a spirit and dodged his knife strikes, while he viciously kicked her in the stomach. Still determined, Dorothy counterattacked, kicking the knife from his hand, only to be strangled immediately after. Just then, the maid's corpse suddenly appeared, stabbing him in the neck with his own knife, knocking Alf out. Dorothy sat down on the cold floor, gasping for breath, wondering how the others were faring. Meanwhile, Lean had taken down 3 vampire servants in a row and was preparing to finish off the 4th, who trembled in fear. When the servant refused to reveal the master's location, Lean, frustrated, described what she planned to do to the vampire and raised her sword, her cold-blooded nature evident. At that moment, Licht appeared, and Lean turned, surprised to see a human in the vampire castle she had been assigned to clean. Licht didn't hesitate to ask, "What are you doing here? And why are all the servants behind you dead?" Lean replied flatly. But then, through the power of resurrection, the 4 maids behind her revived on their own. While Lean was still speaking, they all asked if Licht was all right. He simply replied, "I can't die." Upon seeing the revived maids, Lean felt an unfamiliar fear. Licht told the girls to run, find where Rose and Dorothy were staying, to be safe. They wished him luck and immediately ran. Meanwhile, Lean turned, her wicked smile returning as she raised her sword, preparing for a fight. Though Licht appeared brave in the face of Lean, it wasn't for show. He never wanted to see those girls die. Lean, with cruel eyes, asked once more, Why would a human hero side with vampires? It was as much a betrayal as treason. Licht raised his sword to defend himself, sweat trickling down as he faced the vicious woman. Lean lunged, her sword flashing with intent. She conceded he wasn't bad, even praised his skill. If you had stayed in the human world, you would have made a fortune, she mocked. Licht responded with a cold stare, reminding her that had he stayed in the human world, he would likely have been burned alive like the witches of Salem. Licht accepted her compliment, but Lean soon realized he might have nowhere else to go. If that were the case, she would give him a place to stay. The underworld. She stabbed him straight in the heart, tearing through his internal organs. At first glance, it was a death sentence, but Licht rose again, refusing to succumb. Reacting quickly, Licht slashed at Lean's arm, leaving a deep wound that made it impossible for her to keep her sword steady. Realizing that as long as he could be resurrected, she would never win, Lean desperately searched for a way to end his immortality. She called Licht a monster and attacked him again and again, killing him each time. But eventually, when she understood Licht's impossible resurrection ability, she stabbed him once more before quickly retreating, only for Licht to come back to life, his cold voice echoing, "So there are 2 more of you, huh?" Meanwhile, the group's trump card moved cautiously through the pillars, a sense of impending doom hanging in the air. He muttered under his breath, they should have been more careful before stepping into this place. Something was off. The fact that no enemies had appeared before him yet raised suspicion. Perhaps he had underestimated the vampires, believing them too simple to set a trap for humans. But now, the realization hit him hard. The castle's vastness was proof that they were far more cunning than he'd ever imagined. He'd learned a harsh lesson. The price of underestimating your enemies is always steep. In this moment, breaking into a private castle meant one thing. He was about to meet the mistress of the estate. The lady had just returned from her vacation. It's time to pray, for from this moment, he will never escape this place. Rose materialized from a cluster of bats, taking on a humanoid form, and thanked the intruder for attacking one of her own, allowing her to track him with ease. He remarked on Rose's intriguing nature, even daring to ask if she was a child. A fatal mistake. Rose, ignoring his provocation, inquired if the knife used to stab the bat was poisoned, as she felt a sharp sting within her body. He admitted with a grin that yes, the knife was poisoned. How fortunate for him. Rose relaxed, realizing that her body was unharmed. However, she noted that the poison was weak, barely more than a nuisance, nothing like what a true expert would use. His contempt for her fighting style didn't faze her. Rose pressed further, asking, "If I defeat you, will that stop the other hunters from threatening my parents?" He smirked. "No, it only makes you a bigger target." Rose laughed, a sound full of disdain. Typical human. She was unconcerned, confident she would soon defeat him. He teased that her words were grand, but lacked any real strength to back them up. Yet with Rose, no openings were given. She was eager to see Dorothy and Licht again, urging him to end this quickly. Musk boasted that his team had captured 2 of Rose's friends, and she had no way of confirming his claim. Rose couldn't see through the deception, so when she rushed forward and bit his hand, doing what a vampire does, he seized the opportunity, tricking her into turning away to search for her friends. But just before he could strike, Rose transformed and soared into the air. As she left, she coldly told him, "Stay here and die." In his shock, he stabbed himself with his own sword. Rose swiftly located Licht, still unharmed. Together, they flew off to find Dorothy, who was still seated, red marks around her neck and her dress stained with blood. Licht used his resurrection power to save the maid, ensuring they were safe, for now. As Dorothy prepared to send her spirits after the fugitive, a terrifying presence cloaked the castle, bringing with it a murderous aura. Rose immediately recognized it. It was her father, sending Dorothy into a panic so intense, she later threw up from his suffocating aura. Rose's father had encountered the vampire hunter and dealt with him as only a vampire could. Meanwhile, Rose's parents ignored Licht's self-deprecating remarks, not paying them any mind. Licht and Dorothy stepped away for a while, allowing Rose to spend precious moments with her parents. But Rose's father couldn't resist teasing her, suggesting that Licht might be a suitable match for her, hinting that the young man might have feelings for Rose. Time was running out, and it was time for the 3 to return to Dystopia. Rose promised that she would return to visit her family someday. Rose rushed outside to meet her friends. They returned to Dystopia without any further incident, and as they parted ways, the two girls bid Licht farewell, returning to their respective roles. Licht went to his room, where little fairies, in her nightgown, had diligently tidied everything in his absence. She should clean her own room, but that could wait. "How was your day off, Nana?" she asked sweetly. Licht smiled and replied that the holiday had been enjoyable, and he had even met Rose's parents. In dystopia, nothing major seemed to happen, which left him with a sense of sadness. Who really had a relaxing day off? By the way, Ferris mentioned that Arya had recently looked for Licht. Why seek someone out on their day off? Anyway, the big boss shouldn't be kept waiting, so they set off to find Arya in dystopia. Thankfully, Arya seemed in a relaxed mood this time, but before Ferris could finish her second sentence, Arya appeared behind them, checking if Licht was all right. Ferris was right. Licht did seem a little down, a sadness stemming from the trauma of humanity's betrayal. Arya recognized it and allowed him some rest. Licht's issue was clear, his skills were acknowledged here, but he was rejected by his own kind. Soon, Ferris and Arya returned, telling Leech that a new mission awaited him. Byrne, the queen of the Rasaga kingdom, had requested bodyguards from dystopia, as a deadly assassin was targeting her. Arya revealed that the human settlement was in chaos, and the queen of the Rasaga kingdom was marked for assassination. As a result, the entire kingdom would likely descend into turmoil if their queen were to fall. This mission was not only about protecting the queen, but also her kingdom. Arya couldn't trust anyone else with this, because if the worst happened, only Licht's resurrection ability could ensure their safety. Arya had complete faith that Licht would do his best. Arya appeared in a new outfit, edgy and mysterious. Licht told her to wait a few minutes before they left, surprised by her new look. He wondered where Arya had acquired such clothes. They both felt she was a bit overconfident in her style. Arya explained that it was a result of fortune-telling. Arya looked uncertain. Licht, more knowledgeable about the kitsune species, explained that some kitsune possessed the ability to foresee the future through their spiritual powers. Arya sighed, realizing she had to consider this explanation, and agreed to draw up a protection plan. As per her instructions, Byrne was to be temporarily confined to her room, unable to leave until the situation was deemed safe. Arya didn't care if she was assassinated, for Licht would protect and revive her, but such a scene could not be seen by mortals. Meanwhile, Anna was appointed as the queen's personal messenger, ensuring communication with the outside world. Licht would watch over Byrne every moment, except during private moments, like when she needed the bathroom. With everything in place, Arya decided it was a good time for a nap. From inside her room, Byrne explained the situation to Anna, who was still frightened and confused. The brave girl listened, asking if her master would truly be safe. Byrne reassured her, telling her to relax for a few days. If anything happened, Anna would be alerted, whether by words or screams. At that moment, Anna was the only one Byrne fully trusted. Besides the two sitting behind her, Arya and Licht, both of whom didn't appear entirely comfortable. Arya bluntly asked if trusting someone as talkative as Anna was wise. Her instincts told her the girl could ruin everything at any given moment. Nevertheless, Byrne reassured her that Anna was a good person and would do the right thing when needed. It was surprising that Byrne could remain locked in a room for 3 days without causing any significant issues for the kingdom. It seemed people had placed far too much trust in her. Still, Byrne could communicate through the door, keeping prying eyes at bay. Meanwhile, the nobles and politicians were busy managing the crisis involving adventurers. Arya, in her usual lazy manner, decided to go back to bed, since there was nothing else to do, or play several decks of cards, which quickly became boring. Byrne and Licht were uncertain about what to do next. The queen began admiring Licht's remarkable ability to revive. However, this power came with its own dilemmas. For instance, what happens if Licht dies of old age? Will his resurrection spell automatically bring him back to life? Byrne also had some pressing questions. How long after death can a person be revived? Looking at Arya's case, it seems at least 100 years, with no limit to how often it can be used. What an unfair skill. Yet, there was a catch. Licht couldn't revive someone from a distance. You had to be in the same space as them. At least that was his understanding for now. He'd never tested the skill's distance limit. Could it work on Dorothy's spirits? As the sky began to fill with stars, Byrne realized they had been talking for quite a while, and Licht appeared to be enjoying the conversation about magic. However, the queen began to feel uneasy. This was usually the time of night when she would take a warm bath outside her room. But, according to Arya's orders, No one was allowed in or out until the 3-day period was over. Licht gently tried to wake his boss from her dreadful dreams of merry carnage, narrowly avoiding having Arya bite his hand. Fortunately, he pulled back in time, avoiding both a painful death and an unexpected resurrection. Byrne had hoped Arya would join him in the bath, and Arya agreed. Byrne thanked Licht for coming up with this idea for him. Arya asked Licht if he wanted to join her in the bath. Licht politely declined the invitation to bathe together. The two girls made their way to the secret bathroom. After 3 days of caution, a hidden door opened, revealing a discreet bathroom. Entirely out of sight from outsiders, Byrne said he had to keep this bathroom a secret from everyone. Arya immediately entered the bathroom, discarding her clothes. The two girls enjoyed a relaxing time together, their laughter filling the air. The assassin waiting outside clicked his tongue in frustration. There would be no easy assassination tonight, as his target was not alone, and that girl was the most terrifying thing he had ever encountered. He didn't know where the queen was, but he could see Lish through the slightly open window. At that moment, he shot a poisoned dart at Licht, but after dying, Licht woke up as if nothing had happened, assuming he must have simply fallen asleep. Arya and Barony emerged from the bathroom just after, and Licht asked if anything unusual had occurred. Arya nodded, then noticed the window was slightly open. This wasn't good for her space control skills, which only activated in enclosed spaces and slowed time, giving her a significant advantage. Regardless, the three of them decided to rest before the next day, as they needed to stay alert. Arya clutched the soft, fluffy tail of a stuffed fox and fell asleep almost immediately. Licht also rested on the sofa and woke up to the morning sunlight. Byrne invited him for a cup of coffee, while the Demon King woke up. Arya reassured Licht that she was feeling better after yesterday's incident, where she had fallen asleep on duty. When she looked outside, she saw a suspicious figure lurking in the shadows of the building below, secretly watching them. Arya opened the window, startling the figure. Arya entrusted Byrne to Licht. When they saw the figure running away, Arya, receiving a nod of approval from Licht, jumped out the window to chase him.